Moving on to number 9, we have The Fight. A video of Mike Tyson's fight from 1995 went viral online for containing supposed proof of a time traveler. In the background of the video, you can see a man who appears to be recording or taking photos of the fight on an iPhone or another modern camera phone. The fight was in 1995 and camera phones were not sold until the 2000s. As a result, many people are convinced that the man in the audience is a time traveler, who I guess is a fan of Mike Tyson. What also tripped people out is the fact that the main cameras used in the 90s were the ones with the lenses in the middle. This camera is clearly lacking that. However, others believe that the man is not a time traveler and in fact was just taking a photo on a camera known as the Casio QV10A. Even though it's been potentially debunked, there are people out there that don't believe it for a second. In our 8th spot, we have the Mohawk Man. It's like, where's Waldo with these photos? Except you're looking for the person that doesn't belong. So this next image is apparently from 1905 and shows workers and a banana boat delivering goods. However, near the boat there appears to be someone standing there in a white t-shirt rocking a Mohawk style haircut, which is a very unusual haircut for that time period. The men in the photo are wearing suits and top hats and have fancy mustaches and look well dressed, whereas he's there in a plain t-shirt. Due to the fact that he looks out of place, people have pegged him as a time traveler. He kind of reminds me of Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver though. In our 7th spot, we have the Hipster, another very popular photo that has been circulating online. So the photo contains a crowd of people in the 1940s at the reopening ceremony for the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia. Well, in this photo, everyone seems to be dressed up besides the man on the right hand side of the photo. Everyone else is in suits and top hats, and this tall man seems to be very out of place dressed like a hipster, hence why he was given that name. He can be seen sporting funky sunglasses, a graphic t-shirt, and of course is carrying a camera. Now, some believe that he is indeed a time traveler, whereas others have tried to debunk it. They claim that all the items he is seen wearing were available back in 1941 when the photo was taken. Either way, he looks pretty out of place. In our 6th spot, we have Greta Thunberg. I'm sure all of you have heard about Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish activist who is spreading the word about climate change. Well, there's a theory out there that Greta is actually a time traveler. This theory came to life after a photo of 3 children was uploaded to the internet. These children appeared to be at a gold mine on Dominion Creek in the Yukon. However, the one girl looks identical to Greta and is even wearing the same braided hairstyle. As a result, people believe that Greta is a time traveler sent from the future to save humanity before we completely destroy it. And then apparently she traveled back to 1898 to the Yukon before coming to the present moment. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Fentz Legend. So this one is more of a legend, but either way it makes for a good time traveling story. So legend goes that there was a 30-year-old man named Rudolph Fentz who was hit and injured by a New York taxi in the 1950s. His pockets contained a copper token for beer, a bill for the care of a horse, and a letter from 1876 among other unusual items. Turns out that this man was a person who disappeared in 1876 at the age of 29. Like I mentioned before, this is apparently a legend that originated from a 1951 short story book. But others believe that this is actually a cover-up, and that Rudolph Fentz was a real man who was a time traveler. Making our way down the list at number 4, we have the beach time traveler. What's something you would do if you could time travel? Maybe stop a tragedy from happening, save someone's life, or just chill at the beach getting some rays. Because that last one is exactly what this time traveler did. A photo from September 1943 apparently shows British factory workers enjoying their break on the beach during the midst of wartime. Everyone is seen wearing bathing suits that fit the era. But right in the middle of the photo is a man in a brown suit, who honestly looks like Mr. Bean. This dude is also checking something that looks like a phone. Some even say that he's checking his time travel device. People were really weirded out about this man because he sticks out like a sore thumb. As a result, he has been deemed a time traveler. Coming in our 3rd spot, we have the film extra. In this next situation, a woman time traveled to be an extra in a Charlie Chaplin film. Or so it appears that way. In the 1928 film, a woman who appears to be taking a phone call can be seen crossing the screen. The video was in the behind-the-scenes footage from Chaplin's film, The Circus. The woman is in a long black coat and is holding something to her ear, which she is speaking into. Of course, in 1928 there were no cell phones, so how is this possible? 2 words: time travel. However, others believe that she is simply holding a hearing device to her ear, or that she's holding up her hand to shield her eyes from the sun. But that still doesn't explain why she appears to be talking to herself and holding the black rectangular object like a cell phone. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this one. In our second spot, we have the Canadian man. Now, this photo is pretty odd. The photo is over 100 years old and shows a bunch of dressed up Canadians chilling on a hill. Another Canadian time traveler. At first glance, everything appears to be normal, until you take a closer look. On the left side of the photo, there's a man on the hill that seems out of place. I mean, the men are dressed up in top hats and suits, and he's just chilling there in a t-shirt and shorts. In fact, the 2 men beside him are giving him a look like, who's this guy? As a result, people have referred to him as the surfing time traveler. Like seriously, he seems so out of place. But also, why would you choose that as your time traveling outfit? Like I'd pick something cool, like a leather jacket, you know, look all cool and edgy. And in our number 1 spot, we have the cell phone. Another time traveler caught using a cell phone. So if you're gonna go back in time, don't bring your phone. A film from 1938 shows a woman talking on a device that looks just like a cell phone. Again, how is that possible when the first mobile phone wasn't available to buy until around the 80s? After this video made headlines, a YouTube user came forward claiming that the lady in the video was her great-grandmother. She apparently asked her grandmother, whose name is Gertrude Smith, about the video, and she said that she really was using a cell phone. Apparently, the phones were a prototype developed by a communications factory in Massachusetts. Gertrude and 5 other women were given the phones to test out for a week. But it's still hard to believe that this company was way ahead of the times. When mobile phones were ready, they were big, not the small ones that fit comfortably in your hand as seen in the video. So it really does make us wonder, what's real and what's not? Honestly, it seems hard to believe, and Gertrude Smith seems like a made-up name. And it was never even confirmed if what this user said was true. So it may just be that time travel is real and Gertrude was not too sly and got caught in action.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Moberly Jourdain incident. This is one of the most famous cases of possible time travel, but it also might just be a ghost story? I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what to think, so I'll just tell you the story and let you decide for yourself. In 1901, 2 professors from St. Hughes College in Oxford, England, went to take a little visit to the Palace of Versailles, which if you didn't know was the French royal home until the monarchy was abolished in 1792. That means that this was once the home of Marie Antoinette, and she was one of the last royals to live there before she was executed in 1793. So, on this visit in 1901 by these 2 professors, they're just walking around, seeing the sights, enjoying their time. As they're checking out the private retreat built for Marie Antoinette by her husband Louis XVI, boom, out of nowhere, these 2 just see the Marie Antoinette sitting there, sketching away, dressed in 1780s attire. But not only her, there were a bunch of people also dressed in this same sort of way who seemingly just appeared out of nowhere. Just as quickly as they appeared, however, once the tour guide approached the 2 professors, all of the people vanished. The pair ended up writing a book about their experience, which was quite successful because of how grounded it seemed. Did they travel through time? Did they see ghosts? Or is this all just made up? In our number 9 spot today, we have the bookstore. In 1996, a man and his wife were out in Liverpool doing a bit of shopping. The man's wife went into a bookstore, and instead of accompanying her there, he wandered off down the street in search of a CD store. As he strolled down the street, he began to notice everything getting quiet. After this, he noticed a van that looked like it was from the 1950s that honked and swerved around him. At this moment, he realized that he was somehow standing in the middle of the street and that everyone around him was dressed in 50s styled clothing. Like anyone would be in this situation, he was super confused, and he went to head back to the bookstore where he had left his wife, but when he turned around, the bookstore didn't even exist anymore. Where the bookstore was a minute ago was now a women's clothing store, and as soon as he did, it turned back into the bookshop he had initially left his wife life in. He was back in 1996 and could not figure out what the heck had just happened to him. After this whole ordeal, he also learned that the clothing store he had seen and gone into hadn't existed since the 1950s either. Whether this is a real time travel story or there's some sort of other explanation behind it, that poor man was probably absolutely terrified. In our number 8 spot today we have Hutton and Brandt. In 1932, journalist J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were sent by the German newspaper to the Hamburg shipyard in order to do a story. Everything was going fine and well and normal and honestly kind of uneventful until things took a large, crazy turn. Both Hutton and Brandt realized that they were caught in an air raid and had bombs raining down around them. Brandt, like the dedicated photographer he was, snapped a few photos, but the pair quickly evacuated the area to get to safety. When they returned to central Hamburg all shaken up, no one believed their story at all. They got the photos developed in order to show their proof, but to their surprise, the photos showed no such thing that would suggest the story they were telling. With no evidence and no one around who would believe them, the pair had no choice but to just go on living their lives. 11 years later, however, Hutton was living in London and he opened up the newspaper one day to see what he never expected. The newspaper that day detailed the story of Operation Gomorrah, which was an air raid on Hamburg, and the photos in the paper looked exactly like what he had experienced 11 years earlier. Did these two somehow end up getting teleported to a time 11 years later while they were out doing that story that day? I truly don't know what other kinds of explanations there could be. In our number 7 spot today we have Live Your Lie. A guy on TikTok who goes by the username Live Your Lie has begun to post videos claiming that he is a time traveler from the year 3036, and he offers his warnings to all of us. He tells his followers that they are as free as they will ever be right now, and that our kids won't even see freedom. He says, "So suck it up, because as simple-minded as your time period is, you got it pretty good, you just don't know it." Okay, Mr. Live Your Lie, don't absolutely roast us all. Anyway, when asked about the world population in his year, he says it's just over 2 billion people. He talks about something called the Big Blackout, which he says happens in December of 2052. He says that the Big Blackout is when basically everything goes dark for upwards of 5 years. The internet, the power, it all gets disconnected on account of what's called the terrors, but many speculate otherwise. He says that during these years there's riots, turmoil, and that it's just the worst of times, and that it takes 20 years for things to get fully back online. He also adds that in the year 3036 we still have zoos, but all of the largest animals are gone, so the zoos then actually just consist of animals like dogs and cats. I'm honestly not sure what to make of this one. Like, if he really is a time traveler, I appreciate the heads up on what's to come, but couldn't he have also said like one nice thing about the future? Also, if time travel exists in 3036, why doesn't everyone just head back in time to when things were good? I don't know, maybe there's some sort of reason, or maybe he's lying. I guess one day someone will find out for sure. In our number 6 spot today we have Sir Victor Goddard. In 1935, when Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard was still a wing commander, he was instructed to head over to an airbase that was located in Jourdain, Scotland, that was inactive at the moment. As he flew over the base, he noticed it was in pretty terrible condition and that cattle had now begun grazing through the grass that found its way through the tarmac. Later on, as he was still flying, he found himself in a bit of a bad spot due to terrible weather conditions. To avoid anything bad happening, he decided to land at this inactive airbase and wait out the bad weather. What's weird, however, is as he got close to the base, the torrential downpour abruptly stopped and the sky very suddenly opened up with bright sun shining down. This was weird but not totally unexplainable, but what was unexplainable is that the inactive airbase could now be seen in full use and full of mechanics in blue overalls working on yellow planes. This was weird for a number of reasons. Firstly, he had just seen the base and it was not even close to looking like this, so how could this all have just come out of nowhere? The mechanics weren't wearing their khaki colored uniforms that were the norm then, and the Air Force didn't use yellow planes, they instead painted all of their planes silver, and there was one plane there that he wasn't able to identify or recognize. Sir Goddard left the situation completely confused and shocked, but that shock only got worse 4 years later when he visited Jourdain again. After the years that had passed, when he visited again, again, he saw the exact same scene he had seen 4 years before, like a full deja vu moment. Did he get confused on that day 4 years earlier? Did he fly into the future? Was this some sort of a Flight 828 situation? Unfortunately, there's a good chance we may never know for sure what really happened. In our number 5 spot today, we have time travel _0. Okay, so this is one that at the time was both one of the most famous and one of the most believed cases around. In the year 2000, an online thread began about time travel paradoxes on a forum for the Time Travel Institute. On the thread, a user commented on how a time machine could theoretically be made, and this prompted the response of a user whose screen name was time travel _0, and they said, "Wow, Paul is right on the money. I was just about to give up hope on anyone knowing who Tipler or Kerr was on this word line. By the way, number 2 is the correct answer, and the basics for time travel start at CERN in about a year and end in 2034 with the first time machines built by GE. Too bad we can't post pictures, or I'd show it to you." Okay, so this is obviously insinuating that whoever the heck time travel _0 is a time traveler. Throughout the next year, people continued to post questions and messages they had for this guy on that thread, and throughout time travel _0 became known as John Titor, and he told us all his story in great detail. He said that he had been sent back to 1975 in order to bring an IBM 5100 computer to his own time, but he was just stopping into 2000 for a brief rest on his way back home. I guess time travel is exhausting? I personally would not know. He said that the reason for the mission to get the computer was because he needed it to debug various legacy computer programs in 2036 in order to combat a known problem where UNIX was going to have a problem in 2038, similar to what people thought was going to happen in the changeover from 1999 to 2000. There definitely are people out there who still believe that John was a real time traveler, so I guess I'll just leave this one up to you to decide. In our number 3 spot today, we have Andrew Carlson. On January 28, 2003, Andrew Carlson was arrested and held by the police for insider trading at Wall Street. This was because of the fact that in 2 weeks, through the stock market, Andrew was able to go from having $800 to making $350 million. Yep, $350 million in 2 weeks. That is absolutely insane. When the authorities arrested him, they assumed he made his profits through obtaining illegal insider trading information, but when they asked him how he was able to do this, Andrew said that he was actually from the year 2256, and so he knew exactly how all of the stocks were going to perform. Obviously, no one believed this story and just assumed he was telling an extremely far-fetched lie, which in circumstances like this would seem like a pretty safe assumption. But get this, when Andrew was released on bail, he totally disappeared, and despite several attempts to find him, no one has ever been able to locate him. To make matters even a little wilder, it is said that he was also able to accurately predict the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. Not sure how, but that's what the internet tells me. In our number 2 spot today, we have Edward. Edward is a man who has claimed that he has proof of the apocalypse, and he even brings photos along to prove it. Edward first appeared on Apex TV, which I'll be the first to admit hasn't exactly been a source of credible information, but who knows, maybe this is the time that they got it right. Edward claims that he was part of a top secret program in 2004 and that he was chosen to time travel to the year 5000. This photo I just talked about is a photo that Edward carries that shows Los Angeles completely underwater. In fact, Edward says that in the year 5000 the entire world is underwater, but humans have found a way to live on the water. He claims it happened because of global warming and explained that there was just too much CO2 in the air, which step by step destructed the natural shield zone. I'm not a Photoshop expert, so I wouldn't even know what to look for while looking at these photos he claims to have taken in the year 5000, so you guys let me know, you Photoshop experts watching this. In our number 1 spot today, we have Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, before I started making this list, I was not convinced that time travel would be a possibility, but after making this list, I think I might be convinced that Edgar Allan Poe is a time traveler. Seriously, just hear me out on this one. There are two main examples why, and I'm gonna do my best to keep them concise. So firstly, Poe's only completed novel was published in 1838, and it tells the tale of mutiny on a whaling ship lost at sea. The men on the ship realize that they need to resort to some extreme measures in order to stay alive, so they begin drawing straws to see who they're going to sacrifice for food. A boy named Richard Parker drew the shortest straw, and therefore he became the next meal. Okay, so let's fast forward 46 years to 1884, and in real life there are now 4 men who have been set adrift after the sinking of a yacht. These men found themselves in a similar predicament to the novels, and I kid you not, they ended up taking the same route and elected to take the life of and then eat a cabin boy. The cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. Not convinced yet? Well, what if I told you that he accurately predicted a scientific advancement before it was even known by, well, scientists? In 1840, Poe penned the gruesome story The Businessman, in which the narrator suffers a traumatic head injury as a child and later lives a violent life. The weird thing about this story is that he was able to grasp frontal lobe injury so well before it was even a thing that was able to be greatly studied, as the first time behavioral changes caused by this kind of injury were able to be studied didn't come until 1848. An actual neurologist, Eric Altschuler, wrote, "There's a dozen symptoms and he knows every single one. There's everything in that story. We've hardly learned anything more. It's so exact that it's just weird. It's like he had a time machine." Maybe I didn't convince you, but I'm not gonna lie, this convinced me.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Antikythera Mechanism. In the 1900s, a team of divers exploring a Greek island made a fascinating discovery. They came across an ancient shipwreck. The ship was filled with statues, jewelry, coins, pottery, etc. But the weirdest thing the ship contained was this blob of corroded bronze and wood. 2 years later, an archaeologist decided to examine this, and it was discovered that it was some sort of astronomical clock. But the items came from ancient Greece, and clocks hadn't been invented then. So it's pretty weird. That's suspicious, as Cardi B would say. So this item was in similar size to a mantle clock. The bits of wood fragments on it suggest that it was probably in a wooden case. They also believe the case would have had a large circular face with rotating hands. There was also a knob on the side, and the mechanism could rotate forwards or backwards. Needless to say, it was a fairly complex object for that time period, so some believe that it was left by time travelers. Moving on to number 9, we have the Viking sword. And guys, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. Archaeologists unearthed the Viking sword Ulfbert that dates back from 800 to 1000 AD, and I hope I said the sword's name right, or else you guys are gonna just come at me in the comments. So this was quite shocking since they didn't have technology to make those kind of swords back then. It was only available 800 years later during the Industrial Revolution. So what's up with that? Jerry Seinfeld, what's up with that? Not only that, but its carbon content is 3 times higher than other swords of its time. It suggests that iron ore must have been heated to at least 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to make this sword. And they didn't have that kind of technology to do that back then. So everyone is just freaking confused. It might have been dropped by a time traveler or something like that. In our 8th spot, we have the drill bit. So for this point, a weird drill bit was found in a piece of coal. Okay, so maybe a worker lost it while working in the mines or shoveling some coal. But no, the piece of coal that it was found in was said to have formed hundreds of millions of years ago. You know, back when they didn't have drill bits. How was it that this ended up in coal? Could it be part of a time machine that fell out during the traveler's journey? Who knows? But it's pretty weird and an unexplainable discovery. Not to mention the coal was around 22 inches thick and buried down 7 feet. It just makes no sense. Moving on to number 7, we have the brass bell. Here's another weird object found inside of coal. I feel like we could just do a whole list on top 10 weird objects found in coal. So basically, in 1944, a 10-year-old boy by the name of Newton Anderson was shoveling coal into his furnace at his house. That's when a piece of coal was dropped and it broke in half. Inside the coal, there was this mysterious bell. But the coal that he was using was said to be around 300 million years old. Back then, the dominant life form on Earth was insects. So obviously they weren't using bells. Also, the bell contains an unusual mixture of metals, including copper, zinc, tin, arsenic, iodine, and selenium. Not a typical combination used to make objects. Now, a man named Boris Balazs ended up taking the bell to the geology department at the University of Delaware. They conducted studies and discovered that the bell was handmade. So again, how on earth is this possible? And what time traveler brings a bell with them on their journey? Seriously, out of all things, a bell. In our sixth spot, we have the dino figures. In 1944, thousands of little dino-looking figurines were dug up in Mexico. I mean, okay, that's cool, I'd buy a figurine of a dinosaur. The only problem is that people and dinosaurs didn't exist at the same time. There were around 32,000 carved pieces. The pieces date back to 2500 BCE, a time when there were no dinosaurs around, and people couldn't have possibly known about them. This is all according to scientists. What does this even mean? Like, were there some other creatures that roamed the earth back then that we don't know of? Or is there a time-traveling paleontologist out there? We're now at our fifth and halfway mark with the Coso artifact. In 1961, 3 rock hunters were exploring the mountains of eastern California with hopes to find geodes to sell at their gift shop. They gathered a bunch of them and then took them back home, where they proceeded to cut them in half. However, one of the geodes practically broke their new crystal saw in half when they were trying to get it open. Instead of finding crystals inside, they actually discovered something more intriguing. Inside this rock mass was a perfectly circular porcelain-like section. In the center of the section was a tiny magnetic pin. An X-ray of the rock revealed that there was also a spring or helix at one end. From there, people realized that it resembles a modern-day spark plug. However, it's theorized that this rock is about 500,000 years old. But spark plugs were not invented until the 19th century. Again, is this a piece from a time machine or what? In our fourth spot, we have the ancient laptop. In a sculpture from 100 BC, it depicts what appears to be a young girl holding open a laptop for another woman. Of course, they didn't have laptops back then, so what is this? Not gonna lie, it does look like a laptop. And if it's not, then what is it? People then thought, okay, maybe it's a jewelry box, but the width of the structure is too narrow to be a jewelry box. Now, here's something to think about. Look back at the old Greek tales about the Oracle of Delphi. This was said to allow the priests to connect with the gods. In return, they give them advanced info. Many believe that this was given to them from the gods. Not only that, but the thing she's holding has 2 holes in it. Maybe one for a charging cable and the other for a USB key, perhaps? I don't know, that's just what people think. Moving on, number 3, we have the gold airplanes. A couple of years ago, researchers were studying the Incas when they discovered they left behind some interesting objects. One was a small golden figurine that closely resembles a modern jet plane. Upon analyzing them, people have noticed that the figures have what appears to be wings, a stabilizing tail, and landing gears. But of course, they didn't have planes back then, so isn't that interesting? Ancient astronaut theorists are convinced that the Incas somehow knew what planes were. This has led people to believe that maybe they were in contact with aliens. In our second spot, we have the old hammer. Back in 1934, a hammer was found in Texas. The hammer was encased in stone. This stone was said to be more than 100 million years old. Which brings up the question, how the hell did they have hammers 100 million years ago? The hammer was complete with a wooden handle and everything, but it had turned to coal because of the age. This suggests that this hammer was made even before humans were around. I'm telling you, some time traveler went back 100 million years ago and then left their damn hammer. Or maybe their machine broke down and they tried to fix it, but were unsuccessful and got stuck there. And all that survived was their lone hammer. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Egyptian Hieroglyphs. This one is pretty crazy, not gonna lie. So upon studying ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, scientists noticed some unusual glyphs present. These glyphs looked exactly like modern day planes and helicopters. Obviously, they didn't have planes and helicopters back then, so this is crazy! These glyphs were found in a temple in Egypt and are said to be roughly 3,000 years old. There's drawings of insects and birds, and then you can clearly see what looks like those 2 aircrafts. So there are a couple of theories here. Number 1, Egyptians are smarter and way more advanced than we thought. They didn't have planes, but maybe they were already drawing blueprints for them. Theory 2, they were visited by alien life forms, and what they were drawing are the alien spacecrafts that they saw. Or 3, they developed time travel and saw into the future. And then they're trying to tell others about what they saw in the future through these glyphs.